This is the Pro Wrestling Illustrated podcast. I'm your host, PWI senior writer Al Casso, joined as always by my co-host Brian Salma. How's it going?
It's going okay, Al. Happy to be back with you once again.
Yes, and joining us this week, we've got a couple of guests. We sort of teased it in a recent podcast, but scheduling a confusion, so we weren't able to do it. Then we talked about having two fellow podcasters on, so very much undersold. Who we were having on. Didn't mention that they're also both former world champions, talking about Steve Maclin and Deonna Purrazzo. Steve, the reigning TNA international champion, is that right?
Yeah,
I'm getting my national
two-time TNA international champion.
Yes, and obviously former world heavyweight champion, and Deonna, a multiple-time knockouts champion now in AEW and Ring of Honor superstar. Thank you so much for coming on, guys.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Look, I even wore a New Jersey a sweatshirt for you guys.
There you go. Appreciate it.
Brownie points.
Bon Jovi fans like myself. Anyhow, we wanted to talk about, as I mentioned, you guys have your own podcast and obviously a lot going on in your careers. We will get into it all in a moment. Real quick, get plugs out of the way. Not exactly sure when this is going to air, so I won't promote the I don't know what the latest issue of Pro Wrestling Illustrated is, but whatever it is, head on over to pwi-online.com and get yours. We wrapped up the 500 issue. That's been on sale for some time. By the time you're hearing this, I'm sure the women's 250 will be out, and we are very much hard at work at the tag team 100 list. Maybe you guys will be in all three. I don't know.
Well, I think it's good we're doing this before that issue, because that way, if Deonna has any complaints about where she's ranked, she can't complain here today to our faces, right? You know.
Yeah. I checked your guys'
last
rankings.
Year's been rough. If I'm on it, I'll be. If I'm on it at all, I'll be happy.
Yeah. I checked both your rankings, and you both have had some pretty respectable showings of the year. I think you made all the way up to 3 1 year, right? To twice in the top 10, Deonna, and Steve just outside the top 50 this year. I think 51, and you were in.
It's a good number.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Basically in the top whatever percent. So certainly nothing
10%.
Yeah, excellent. So so much to talk about with you guys. First, I'll talk to you as fellow podcasters. How's that been going? Boots to boots, or you're a few months in now. What's the response been?
Yeah, I think the response has been really, really great. I think that when I conceptualized this and brought it to Steve, because he's a harder sell to like get on camera and talk about his experiences, I just didn't want it to be all wrestling, because that's not who we are. And this year, especially with just like the opportunities we've been given and the people we've been able to meet, we've really been able to dive deep into the veteran community. And I wanted it to be about his veteran experience and the identity crisis that veterans go through when they get out of the military, but then also how does that translate into everyday life and everyday people? Because we all go through that identity crisis when you have to take off one pair of boots and put on another one. So yes, we can relate it to wrestling, but let's also talk to like real life people who are dealing with that on a daily basis. And so I think that we've hit the veteran community, we've hit the wrestling community, but we're also hitting like the everyday fan who can identify with some of the topics we're talking about.
Yeah, I razz Brian a lot whenever he takes on a new assignment or some project, because it's like I don't know where you find the time, and I was sort of thinking about that with you guys, two working professional wrestlers deciding to do a podcast on their free time. Has it been challenging to fit it in, or is the reality that these days the schedule maybe isn't as rough as it was some years ago, and you do have the time to do things like this?
Yeah, with the schedule in wrestling, it's changed a lot across all the companies, and it's gotten easier on our bodies with less live events and being on the road so much. But we do get out enough to where we're working constantly. I'm up in Toronto this weekend, and then we're at Full Sail with TNA tapings and our pay-per-view of Turning Point coming up next week. But the schedule's been kind of good for us to be able to dive into the podcast and kind of just get our own schedule on the outside of the wrestling world, and that's allowed us to do a lot of charity work as well, working with Tunnel to Towers, where we're meeting with veterans. We're meeting with people that are outside the veteran community, but are all tied to the veteran community, whether it's hockey, it's people in business and management, music. We just had our last episode where it's just like we're diving into all these different stories where, again, it's transitions, people coming to those crossroads in life. and being able to get that story heard, because that's something we don't talk about. A lot of people in the military side don't talk about that transition into the civilian world, and that's always been a stigma, and it's kind of led to that PTSD and suicide, and how do we fix this? But it's across the board for everyone. It's not just the veteran community.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned the military and PTSD, and I was just talking to Brian about this. One story that I was really interested earlier this year was the whole Psycho Stew story. I know how closely you followed this, Steve, out with Rampage Jackson's son out at an independent company out west, attacks this guy, mid-rank, a military veteran like yourself, and basically just goes into business with himself, ends up hospitalizing him. And there was a lot of talk by some about how maybe particularly traumatizing it would be for Stu because of his military background. Can you talk about that at all? I mean, especially when things get particularly physical in there. I mean, do you feel like
the world of pro wrestling is protected by the locker room itself? That's the number one thing, is we're out there to take care of one another. We're out there to make money and work together. And obviously, I don't know the full story because I wasn't there, so I can't really comment that much on it. Do I agree with what happened? No. Do I think things need to be changed in certain aspects of who we let in the locker room these days or kind of involved in wrestling? Yes. But I really don't know that full story, so I can't really comment too much more on that.
And anything you'd say about just as a fellow military veteran, a perspective that people should have about what that was like for, and I know you're not him, but what that might have been like for Psycho Stu in a different way than maybe for other wrestlers.
Obviously, yeah, I don't know. For me, it's a different perspective just because I have different thoughts and views on things in life and the way I would handle certain things. But for him, I hope he has a speedy recovery. And again, I know people are helping him with the GoFundMe and donating to him, so it's good on his end, and hopefully he gets better.
Yeah.
And Steve, I had a question about, because you mentioned, you were talking about the stigma before for veterans, and do you find that that's something that's gotten better over the years? Has it gotten worse? What are your thoughts on that?
It's working that way, and that's the one thing we're trying to put our voices out there with Boots to Boots, and kind of helping the veteran community on our end with just we're an ear and we're a voice. If we can reach one person and help them, if we can just sit and listen to help that one person, that's all we want to do. And for the work we've been doing with Tunnel to Towers and being able to do the 5K this past September and doing the tower climb in June, it's more gratifying for me just because there's that feel of loss in patriotism and how negative everything towards patriotism is.
Yeah.
And what I fought for, and knowing when I came out that tunnel at the 5K this past September in New York, and seeing the NYPD, the FDNY, all these military vets and active duty military from Army, Navy, cadets from friggin' West Point, like, it really just showed that, like, wow, every bit I sacrificed, that I think I still am trying to hang on to, and that pride in my country and what I fight for is still there.
Yeah, that's really great, because sometimes it feels like it goes full circle. You know, there was a time back in the day, 60s and 70s, where veterans were not well respected because of Vietnam and things like that. Then there was a counter reaction, 80s, 90s, where it was trying to make up for that and really respecting the veterans. And sometimes it feels like it threatens to go back the other way again. Like you said, the stigma around patriotism and that sort of thing. Like it feels like
anything in this world with the climate is how you look at things and the way
Yeah.
you carry yourself and handle it. And for me, it's we take care of one another. It's the same in pro wrestling. You're taught that in the locker room. It's the same in a marriage. It's the same in the military. It's like how you treat one another, how you communicate, just being there as a person, an ear and a voice to just have that. And I'm lucky enough to have a wife next to me who allows me to open up that way. And I never really kind of opened up that way before. I was able to kind of do that in TNA with wrestling, at least, to explain a little bit as myself on my character too, having 6.5 minutes on television, diving into that PTSD side of the military thing. Where for me as a veteran, like, I want to portray an actual veteran, not what you see in the 80s and 90s of the Hulk Hogan's, the Hacksaw Jim Duggans,
right.
and waving the American flag. And like, there's nothing wrong with that. But to me, that's just, it's gone wayside. And especially with the way movies are nowadays, everything is so real and relatable. Just like a villain is, just like a hero is, everybody relates to everybody.
I wanted to ask you about that, and yeah, I mean, growing up following wrestling in the 80s and 90s, there was no shortage of military gimmicks. Sometimes the wrestlers had military backgrounds, and sometimes they didn't. but come in with the camo and the fatigues and all that stuff. What were you ever pressured by promoters to have that kind of presentation? What was your comfort level in doing something like that?
No, never really had. Even when I started the Monster Factor, I never really had that pressure. And we actually just talked about it on a previous podcast episode with the infantry of just like how they can pull off the camo. And I wish I can do that. It's never been me, just because I feel it as, for me, it's kind of hokey. But for them, it works. For me, that just doesn't fit who I am and what I try to portray. And I also never want to hold myself as a standard in uniform, where if I have a beard or long hair, I always want to like live up to those standards that are in the Marine Corps. And that's the one thing we always lived up to, is how you look and how you present yourself. And I never felt myself going that way.
Was there a military gimmick that you enjoyed as a kid? Were you Sergeant Slaughter fan of Corporal Kirk?
So Dusty Rhodes, it's funny, Ash by Elegance. Her and I did a bunch of promos together where I was in my dress blue Charlies. It's the short sleeve with dress blue pants. And we did a bunch of vignettes and promos together, and it was a lot of fun. And Dusty was just trying to get that out of me and kind of just show that vulnerability. And I brought up a promo one time of speaking to him about writing the death letter to my mother on deployment, my first deployment in 2009 in Afghanistan. And I brought that up to him. He's like, "Can you say this like on camera and put this on paper?" And it's probably out there on the V-Brick or somewhere in the video log of WWE somewhere with the vignette that we did. But it was a lot of fun to kind of dive into that side of me and know like it's there, but I also never want to be that guy.
Yeah. So again, I think what's so interesting about your podcast is that you are both very successful and in a relationship. And I guess these days there's a few of those, right? The wrestling power couples. I've always thought, given how hectic wrestling is, that's probably a great to have that support system and not be out there on your own. But in your case, you're working for separate companies. So, I mean, could you either you talk about both whether it is a support system, whether that is a good thing to have a spouse in the wrestling business, or is it extra challenging because you've got these demands, but they're for different companies?
No, I think we have a really great balance, and it was amazing when we were at TNA together and traveling together. But I think that we both knew at the end of my TNA contract, it was like, I need to try something else, and I need to expand and see what I can create under a different company. And so it was just something we knew was going to happen. And then with the AEW schedule, like, again, to Steve's point, like, we're not traveling, 7 days a week anymore. And so it's kind of just like 1 or 2 days where we're apart. And then likewise with his TNA schedule, it's 1 or 2 days he's not home. And so we found a good balance where we can still get in a date night, or we can still film our podcast, and it's not like we're spending 2-3 weeks apart at a time. But it's all about balance. It's all about what's important to your relationship. And I think we both value time together and spending time together and being with our dogs. And Steve's parents just moved to Florida, spending time with them. It's a really high priority for us to make time for our family life.
When you're making that decision, and such a big decision, whether or not to leave a company, go out, a step away from TNA, and all the factors that come into that in terms of, I imagine, financial factors and what's best for your career and what else is out there, having this whole other a factor to consider of a relationship and leaving my partner behind, how much more does that complicate that decision?
I don't think it did. I think that we just kind of knew, like, this is what the next step of our life is going to look like. And luckily, we're able to balance each other out, where I'm a little bit more high strung of a person and Steve is very relaxed, right? And just knowing where we can step in and do better for each other. Steve's really good at, like, we always laugh that he's like the ultimate janitor, right? Like, he's really good at, like, the house responsibilities and taking care of the grass and doing the dishes and things like that, where that's not where I love to spend my time. You know what I mean? I'm the podcaster. Let me put this together. Let me go back to school. Let me, learn something. And so I think we're just really naturally good with each other at picking up where the other left off and picking up where the other kind of slacks. So when it came to making that decision for AEW, it was that, this is uncharted territory for us, but this is kind of what our relationship was built for, and that's the type of people we are for each other. So it wasn't really that hard. It was a combination of creative and financial and opportunities, and we're so fortunate today that all of those things have worked out for our favor, and we just kind of balance each other.
And that's also like the benefit too of being in the wrestling business together too. Like you kind of know the writing on the wall when somebody's kind of done everything in one company. And my wife, being a former world champion multiple times, the Reina de Reinas champion, the Ring of Honor world champion, like she had all these accomplishments in such a short period in that 3 years, 3.5 years at TNA. And it's like, where do you go from there after that? Like, how much more do you have left to do in that territory? And it's like the old territory days. So when it came time to making that decision, it was a lot easier on my end to like think on the business side of things. Like, no, you need to leave for a little bit. You can always come back, but you need to go somewhere else and kind of dip your toes in another person's pool, I guess.
Yeah.
I had a question for Deonna actually about that transition. Before I ask the question, though, I have to say, as someone who is half Sicilian, that I'm greatly appreciative of the Italian-American representation in wrestling. I'm a big fan. I was telling Al before we even started, the Vendetta faction, I'm a big fan. But I wanted to get your feeling on, since coming to AEW and Ring of Honor, kind of how would you appraise what your career has been like so far since coming? How do you feel about this phase of your career?
Yeah, I think it's difficult because we are talking about how fast and how much I grew in such a short amount of time at TNA. I came in and was the Knockouts champion like 3 months later, right? In my second or third match in the company. And I think someone did a statistic a few years ago that I think it was like 78% of my time spent in TNA, I was a champion. Whether it was the Knockouts champion, Ring of Honor champion, a tag team champion with Chelsea Green, I spent so much time on top that, not that becomes normal, but it's like I know now what I have to give to a company, and everything is going to be different no matter where you go. So coming into AEW, it's not that I expected to be the world champion, or the internet likes to say like, oh, they're a game changer. Like, I never expected that to be myself, but I know now in the back of my head what, if given the opportunity, I can do to a company and for a women's division. So I said it earlier, joking around, like the last year has kind of been rough because it's like I feel like I've not been able to dig into what I know I can offer. And for whatever reason that is, we're not in control of the creative. I'm just here to do my job and make my boss happy. And, so I feel like that transition has been harder because it's like, I know what I can give. And I have so many creative ideas, and I have so many different avenues we could go, whether it was with Vendetta, whether it is with Virtuosa, and reinventing that for this fan base. I think it's been a moment for me to like reflect and sit back and say, okay, if my job here is not to be the world champion or to be, on TV consistently, what else can I do to make the most of my time? And that's where this podcast came in. That's where going back to school came in, to get my master's degree and things like that. So I think it's been a rough transition, but it's also allowed me to reflect on what I have done for the past 13 years in this business, and then also what I'm going to do when ultimately the day comes that I can't wrestle anymore.
Yeah, and that's a great point too, because I mean, AEW and combining AEW and Ring of Honor as one entity, I mean, you're talking about a very stacked roster there of talent. I mean, it's just, Al and I talk about it all the time. It's exploding with people who have a lot of great abilities. And sometimes the downside of that, I guess, is making sure everybody's getting used to their potential, finding slots for everybody. There's only, so many slots to go around. And like, when you first appeared on the scene, there's this, and I'm not trying to trap you into saying, trust me, I'll say the worst things. But when you first arrived, there's this, that Steve is laughing now, but when you arrive, there's this thing that happens in AEW where somebody hits the scene and it's like this incredible, they're the biggest thing ever. And as fans, we want there to be a follow-up to that. Instead of like, oh, here's the next shiny toy that comes in and that kind of thing. And like I said, I'm not, this is me saying that these views are my views only, just to say that, you have a lot of fans out there that would love to see you doing more. That's all. I'll leave it at that.
I appreciate that. I actually do think that, though we did a really great job bringing me in, telling the story with Toni Storm, and then transitioning right into the story with Thunder Rosa. And I know that it kind of, like it was over a year ago now, and people don't talk about it, because there's so many great things going on with our women's division. But I think they actually did a really great job of saying, like, okay, so yes, you're not the world champion, and now we're going to transition you into fighting for that contention again with a former world champion. And we got to do really great stuff. We got to do a lumberjack match. We got to do a no DQ match. We got to do the first ever women's televised Texas bull rope match. And so I think that, unfortunately, I did get all these opportunities, but they maybe didn't get the fanfare that they deserved. And I think that it's I want to be doing more. Our women's division now has women's tag team championships. Blood and Guts is coming up as we're filming this, and it's opportunity after opportunity that I'm seeing our women get, that I'm like, I can be a part of that. I know I can do that. But that's just not what my job is at this point. And while that can be defeating in some ways, I'm trying to find the positives in being in Ring of Honor and introducing a pure championship. And I am a Ring of Honor kid at heart, and I've been in this company in some way, shape, or form for 10 years. So if I get to carry on that women's division legacy that I created, then I'm going to find satisfaction in that, although it's maybe not the biggest opportunity that I'd like to see myself get.
What do you see as the role of Ring of Honor now? Because there are folks who just say, like, well, do we really need it? It's just sort of a, AEW's minor leagues, kind of the equivalent of an NXT to AEW. And I don't know if that's fair. But it doesn't feel, and I guess this is by necessity because it was purchased by Tony Khan. It doesn't feel like as independent a body as it was once upon a time, in part because you do have talent kind of flowing back and forth between AEW and Ring of Honor. But again, do you think Ring of Honor, there's a reason for it existing?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And I think that, as we're talking about maybe lack of opportunity or a bloated roster on AEW, Ring of Honor is the perfect cure for that. I think that if I didn't have Ring of Honor right now, I wouldn't be seen at all. If they didn't introduce this pure women's championship, I don't know what my role would be on Dynamite or Collision, or if I'd have one. And so I think that, yes, the role of Ring of Honor is giving, the people who aren't at the top of the roster those opportunities to say, look at what I can do. Look at the stories I can tell. Look at the matches I can have when I'm given the opportunity. And maybe that will show some potential to toss me in on a random Collision or a random Dynamite. And so I think a lot of wrestling is, if you're out of sight, you're out of mind. And I think Ring of Honor is keeping a lot of us in mind while we try to tell this story of the Women's Pure Championship. You look at Athena, right? For example, she's been champion for over 1,000 days. And she's, as we're filming this, was just in the Ring of Honor Women's Pure Tournament with Mercedes Moné. If she wasn't on TV, if she wasn't on Ring of Honor, would she have gotten that opportunity? You could argue yes or no. And whether she's deserving of that is a completely different argument, right? But I think that it is kind of that filtering system of who's doing a really great job, who's kind of working their butt off on a show that's not televised, and then how can we transition them up when there's an opportunity or a spot ready for them?
Yeah, that the whole sort of big fish, small pond question, I think is interesting, and it sort of applies to both of you because you've both been there. Steve as sort of in the mid card of NXT, and then as TNA World Champion, and the same in your case as a World Champion, and then now maybe not factoring as heavily into the upper card in AEW. How do you roll with the punches on either? I mean, is there one that you prefer? Would you rather be the top person in a smaller promotion, or does it mean more to be even in the middle of a card of a much bigger promotion with a bigger audience and more eyes on it?
It's where the company needs you at that time and how they see you. And it's also your effort and what you put into your body of work, how you look, how you present yourself, the work that you're going out and showing the world. And hey, I'm a main eventer. Like, I always see myself as a main eventer. I've always seen myself that way. Even as a tag team when I was with the Forgotten Sons of me and Wesley Blake in NXT, we always saw ourselves as a top tag team. But at just that time, we just didn't see that, or we weren't shown that way through the boss's eyes to the rest of the world. But everybody wanted to work with us. We're on every live event, stealing the show every damn night. And that's just a learning process in the wrestling business. It's like, you're not going to be everybody's first choice or that handpicked person that's going to be on the top of the card every night. So wherever you do end up, you take the best of those opportunities, make the most, and it's on us to go out there and get our asses over.
Yeah, and I think that as wrestlers, like, actually, I think I am like a very self-reflective and almost to a fault, right? Where it's like I can see why people might say that about me, but at the end of the day, like, there's nothing I can do. I mentally always make a list, and it's like, what can I control about myself? I can control how my gear looks, and who, the money I spend on my gear. I can control that my hair is always done, that my makeup looks good. I can control, my matches that I have. I can control what I'm pitching to creative. I can get my own vignettes made, which I've done in AEW. I can check all of these boxes of what I can control. But if the company doesn't feel like I'm worth that investment at this time, that's out of my hands. And so, I think that can it be defeating going from, I'm a 5-time, 6-time world champion to now, you don't see me on television? I'd love for that to change. But at the end of the day, behind the scenes, what fans don't see is wrestlers working their ass off to try to change someone's mind, to change that perspective, to pitch ideas to get them back in the mix. And it's not in our control, unfortunately. So, again, it's doing what you can, controlling what you can control, and at the end of the day, knowing that sometimes that's not enough. And there's other things, there's much more to life and then there's just the wrestling business, because this is only going to be a short time in our life.
Do you I'm sorry, again, Brian.
No, I just had a quick question. Well, it's not that quick, but I mean, it's an important topic. I wanted, there's a question for Deonna just about women's wrestling in general. I worked for WWE years ago during the era in the office, during the era when they were going from kind of like the Trish and Lita era, where you had women that were really working their butts off. And then, I mean, no offense, but then going into more of like the models that are going to be trying to wrestle kind of era that happened after that. And one thing that I've seen when I worked there and even beyond is I've always felt that, and Al and I have talked about this, that women wrestlers get held to a different and sometimes more unfair standard than the men do. And I know, and a lot of that has to do with appearance and looks. And not only that, but I mean, men and women in wrestling, it's an aesthetic business. How you look is very important. But I find that with the women, it sometimes could be much more unfair. And I feel in some ways it's gotten better. In some ways it may have gotten worse because of social media. And of course, I'm asking this because I know you have had to deal with these kinds of things. And I was wondering if maybe you could speak on that a little bit, what that's been like for you.
Yeah, I think when I came into AEW, it was so incredibly harsh. And I think that it really defeated me. And I don't want to say like I spun out of control into like this depression, but I wouldn't categorize myself as depressed, but I think I'd categorize myself as the most unconfident and insecure I've ever been in my life. And I think that translated a lot into my wrestling. And I think that I didn't want to be on TV in gear. I didn't want to go to work and have people look at me or judge me and then have to go on the internet, which is such a big part of what we do. And, we all know that's like a big part of AEW is fan perception on the internet, right? And to have that negativity really, really defeated me. Because I had never experienced it before, but then also two, now I'm on this new level where I'm trying to create a new identity and associate myself with this new audience that made me feel like they didn't want me. And it really, really, I feel like translated into how I presented myself on television in a negative way. I wasn't giving the reputation that I've created for myself for 12 years before that. And so it was really hard to try to flip my mindset back. And I think it was really hard in our relationship because I felt so negatively about myself. And Steve's trying to like hype me up and be my husband and be like, I don't care what you look like.
Stay off the internet.
Stay off the internet.
I was going to suggest
like,
that's a
jobs,
good
right?
solution, right?
That's like what she said though. I'm sorry I'm kind of taking over, but like it's
No,
one
no.
of the more infuriating things because it's just one person that has one account with no photo on there, or they have a bio picture of another person.
Right.
And I'm just like, why? Like, just for me, because I do not care what anybody has bad to say about him. Please say I don't care. But like for her to like just get so distraught and upset about it, I'm like, no, I don't care. Like, why do you care what these people think?
Well,
they're just there to get a rise out of you, to get a response, to do this, and they just want. They're also going through something in their own personal life.
Yeah,
and you can't harp on that stuff.
No, and it was really nice to see the entire wrestling community kind of gather around me and say, like, you know, this isn't true, and we love you, and you're beautiful, and kind of something so negative, like the world came together for me in such a positive way. So it was like negative tears because I felt really crappy about myself, but then really happy tears because everyone made me like feel like that sense of community in the wrestling business through something
Right.
really difficult. But I do agree that I think women are held to a much different standard, and I think that especially when it comes to our wrestling, women kind of get one opportunity. You know, it's like the minute you everything's do or die for women, and the minute you don't do 100%, it's like she's horrible, and we forget all of the good things that this person has done or the achievements that they've made. I think that the internet has kind of made it really difficult to like move on past one particular match, you know, and for me it was, you know, working with TMLL, and the one, you know, not so great match I had in Mexico has defined the last year of my career in a lot of cases, and it's like that doesn't necessarily happen for the men, you know. And we've like seen that live happen, so it's a really hard thing to balance between like social media has to care because it's our job, and we have to interact with people, and we need fans, and we need them to be pushing for us, but how do we balance like your opinion doesn't equate my self-worth? It was a really hard thing for me to do, especially when I started at AEW.
Because for the women, I know, Steve, you were talking about, you know, stay off the internet and things like that. And I would agree to a certain extent to not be as pulled into that vortex. Yeah. But that said, with the women, it does seem to be a lot more mean-spirited than what the men have to deal with. I mean, again, Al and I have talked about this. Yes, people's appearances get critiqued, men and women, as wrestlers all the time. I remember when Sheamus came back in WWE, everybody was on his case because, oh my God, he didn't look like $1 million right away. Yeah, the guy's been on a couch for 6 months or whatever, you know what I mean, trying to recover. But with the women, it seems to be a lot more about appearance than it is with the men. And
well, I think on the men's side, though, guys don't really talk about it a lot. And that's, I would say, there's times where I'll see myself on camera, like, I need to lose a little bit, or I should have just not, I should have been dieting a little bit tighter in my life. And she'll be like, you look fine. I'm like, nah, I could probably look better. But like, we just don't talk about it enough. And again, though, I think the microscope is more on the women on that side of things. Even when this past Bound for Glory, I had friends and family sitting in the crowd, and my buddy Marcus's wife is like, people are just zooming in on the women in the ring. I'm like, yep, these are the fans that are in the crowd that you have to deal with, not the casual wrestling fans, but the weirdos that are out there that are doing this. But like, that's also just the climate. Like, they paid a ticket and they're doing that, then so be it. Then it's just, they're the person that's going to be the one on the internet trying to be a troll and trying to get under your skin.
Well, yeah, go on, Al.
I was going to say, as Deonna, who's worse, the men, the male fans, or the women fans when it would come to criticisms like that?
You know what? I think it's male fans, but not like, it's a very close margin, right? Like,
who does it hurt more from hearing it from?
I think it hurts more from women because it's like, you should understand what it's like to be a woman, but then also too, like, would you want someone saying that about you? You know, well, I think it hurts more from the women because it's like, you know how your body changes daily. You know what it's like when you have your period and you're bloated and you don't feel good and your body's changing every day, and like, how could you go on the internet and type something and see what you typed and then still hit send, knowing that you're going through potentially very similar things as any other woman? I think that's really what blows my mind, because I don't treat people that way. I don't understand how someone ever could. But it's like, you know, men, respectfully to all of you, can just be ignorant to the things that women's bodies go through, right? On a daily basis. But a woman doing that to another woman is really pisses me off.
Yeah, I thought about this. I saw Tom Colicchio, who's a famous chef and host of Top Chef. I saw like a speaking engagement with him a couple of weeks ago, and there was a question about sort of like, what is like taping day like for an episode of Top Chef? And he's like, I just get there like 10 minutes before showtime, and that's it. And he said it's completely different for his female co-hosts who have to get there 2 hours early for hair and makeup. And it's like, it's incredible that you have the same job and yet a completely different level of preparation, because there's this whole other standard and threshold that the women have to meet that men just don't.
Well,
Oh my
it's
gosh.
Even
yeah.
when we were filming in Nashville for a while, when we were with Impact, well, TNA at the time, like I would be there and we'd be on the same day of tapings, and she'd have to go in at 9 a.m. when call time was until 1 o'clock, and here I am dropping her off at the building, driving myself to the gym, working out, going to get breakfast, going back to the hotel, showering, and then coming to her, and she still hasn't been done with makeup yet. Just
Yeah.
because the girls have just such a weird makeup schedule and hair and getting everything set for pre-tapes, and it's just like, wow, and at the end of the day, I know she's dead tired because she just sat around and waited all day.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was always at TNA, like the first one in the building at 8 or 9 a.m. to start my makeup, and I'm the last one out. And like, I'm grateful for that because, you know, my time there was amazing and I did so many great things, but I was literally exhausted every single day. There's no time to work out. Sometimes there's no time to eat because
Yeah.
I'm just constantly busy. So I think that even then, when you try to explain these things to fans, where it's like, you want me to work out on a day where I'm in full makeup, like that's just unrealistic, right? They'll just never understand because they're not in our shoes, and honestly, a lot of them couldn't even fathom what it's like to put on a pair of wrestling boots. So I now I get a little sassy on Twitter and basically tell them to F off, you know. And that's me taking my power back, right? And be like, you're not gonna talk to me like that. The Sicilian blood comes out a little bit, but you know, it's these fans will just never understand. And so we can't give them the power to control our mindsets about ourselves, how we view ourselves. And I'm really sad I had to go through that. And I think it's something I'll deal with for the rest of my life. But at the same time, it's something that's like I can use as my superpower.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I just one thing I wanted to just add to that, because you're talking about the perception of other women or even women fans. You know, I roped my wife into watching wrestling with me. She's, you know, that's one of the trials of being married to me. But like my wife she was an MMA fan before I even knew her, and so she has a perspective. She'll watch with me and go, why do they make the women have to be all made up and all their hair done like just to wrestle? Why do they have to look so glamorous when, like, it just seems so odd and alien to her? Because, you know, and I always tell her, like, the presentation levels in wrestling are just so different. It's just like, it's a different animal. It's not just a combat sport, you know, it's showbiz. It's like you're in a movie or you're on a TV show. And it's funny. She just, you know, that was her perspective of why do they have to work that way? You know, why can't they just be like the men?
I love to be made up, and I love to put, you know, my hair up and gear on and all my clothes that, you know, the virtuoso wears, because Deonna Purrazzo doesn't act like that in real, like,
Right.
so it's a different part of me that I get to bring out on screen for the fans, and I love that part of it. But yeah, it's like it's a whole nother ball game when you think about what the women's routine is like to get to perform as opposed to what the men do. And yeah, I wish more people understood that.
Other than tanning on my end is probably the closest I get to hair and makeup is doing a double spray tan the night before.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you guys about TNA, you in particular, Steve, but seeing as you both have a history there, I think they're doing great work. I was at Slammiversary earlier this year and was blown away. I mean, it's one of the best wrestling shows I've been to all year, and it was it was a really good feeling seeing that TNA could do that and has come back. That when I heard that they were booking the UBS Arena, which is near me here on Long Island, I thought, yeah, if I don't know how they're going to set that place up, you know, and it was packed. I mean, it was absolutely packed. There wasn't anything the cameras had to disguise. And then there was a thought, well, it's kind of a novelty thing. These aren't, you know, really going to be TNA fans. And they were singing along to every song that, you know, they knew every act. And it really was kind of like a light bulb going off. It's like, no, TNA is a real thing. They are really like all the way back. You've been there. You were there really for that transition where I think it kind of came back. Was there a moment for you? I don't know if it was maybe even that night where you realized we're really onto something here.
I knew we were onto something the day that I got to TNA, or at the time Impact. And I remember I just got let go from WWE, and Dee was watching live on Twitch stream all the time each week during the episodes. And I'm just watching from beginning to end. I'm like, wow, this is a really good show. Like, everyone's involved. Everybody's a character. It reminded me a lot of the Attitude Era, where just everybody just ebbed and flowed into their stories. And then it got to the main event. You're like, oh, wow, this is a great show from top to bottom. Like, it just entertained you across all different aspects with the knockouts, tag team, the X division, and then even the main event scene. And then being there and then just getting my foot in the door and understanding who I am now as a new character as Steve Maclin, and then just kind of seeing the locker room and the way it carries itself, everybody, the guys and girls behind the scenes. And it's the first time I felt like that family that I've always been told has been other places, that family like style locker room. Like this is the first time like I felt like I was like, oh wow, everybody here wants you to go out and kick ass. Granted, we're all still competing against each other, but everybody's there to make each other better and also to just step up the game. And then when that transition from Impact to TNA finally happened and that name change and that rebrand, that just burst the bubble on how good Impact at that time was and became TNA Wrestling again. And now for us at UBS Arena, like you said, for AJ to come back after 11 years where nobody ever thought that was going to happen, it was a really cool defining moment just to show where TNA is going, especially with the working relationship with WWE. And then now we just set another record at Bound for Glory up in Lowell, Mass. And now we're getting ready for Genesis up in Dallas, or Downey, Dallas, I should say. And it's everything. That's the best part about those. You even said, "Wow, there's no way they can sell out that arena." Like, please continue to doubt TNA Wrestling. That's what I love. I love doubters because no matter what, that's kind of been us throughout our entire careers. Is where people doubt us, and then the same as TNA, it will never die as long as you doubt us.
And Steve, what you mentioned the working relationship. What's been the locker room reaction to that, to the NXT WWE relationship that we've seen now just explode?
It's good for us, obviously, with trying to get towards a new TV deal, which I think is in the works, and hopefully that announces soon. I would hope so. I know it keeps being told to us that it's going to happen. So hopefully, old trucker hat Carlos is getting that job done on that end. But for the locker room, like you have the young kids who want to go out there and get opportunity and be seen on NXT, and then you have the people that have been there in WWE and NXT, where it's like, if I go, I go, and I'm one of those people. Like if it works out to where the story makes sense, I'll go back. But at the same time, if there's a younger talent that's hungry that needs to be seen, like a Leon Slater, a Jason Hotch, Judas and or Travis of Sinner and Saint, like a tag team, and them like to go there and get an opportunity for where they are in their young careers. That's awesome. But for me, I want to go there where it means more because I've done enough. I think in TNA, being a former world champion, being a two-time international champion, where I think I have that kind of resume where it'll mean a little bit more.
One thing we've talked about a lot, and we were just actually talking about yesterday in relation to world titles and the value of world titles, is that this is something that's been a little bit difficult to reconcile. And Pro Wrestling Illustrated recognizes TNA's World Championship as a world championship, and because of that, it was a little hard to sort of like deal with Trick Williams, who is essentially a developmental talent for WWE, and was their developmental champion, coming over and then being your world champion, and sort of the message that sends. That does that mean that TNA is slotted in kind of the greater wrestling landscape somewhere below WWE's developmental system? How have you guys viewed that?
I haven't thought that at all. Obviously, it's right place, right time in the world of pro wrestling, and Trick Williams got that ball and he ran with it. And he took that opportunity, and I think the world kind of got to see who Trick Williams was with him being the TNA champion. And that's what that title has been held to as a standard forever, from the beginning of AJ Styles and Kurt Angle and Sting and Samoa Joe, like the prestigious names that are on that list. And to be among that as well for Trick, it just elevated his game. And now he's got to go show himself more in the WWE side of things, where I wish I was given those opportunities when I was in NXT to go somewhere else where there wasn't enough room for me on NXT TV. I've pitched when NXT UK was happening. Blake and I weren't doing anything in NXT. We pitched to go to the UK to be a tag team, and just like you just got to find the opportunities. And he found a good spot at the right time, and then ultimately got to the best story of Mike Santana finally winning at Bound for Glory.
Is there any concern, though, among the wrestlers about like, oh, how does this? The other situation that comes to mind was when Joe Hendry was Randy Orton's opponent at WrestleMania. On one hand, everybody thought, oh, how great, TNA's getting this huge slot. And then when he made relatively quick work out of Joe Hendry, there was a thought like, wow, you're going to do the TNA World Champion like that? What does that say about that title and again where their position is in the wrestling business? Were there any, what was kind of the reaction in the TNA locker room to that?
Of course there's going to be those ways like, it could have been booked better this way or that, but it's like at the end of the day, it's not our television show. We can control what only we can control, Joe got the opportunity to go out at WrestleMania with the TNA World Championship around his waist. It put more eyes on our product. It's elevated us to where we're at now with selling out UBS Arena and then being at Bound for Glory in Lowell, Mass, setting that North American record. And it's only getting better. And we're making the most of this opportunities that we're given. And for me, being a two-time international champion now and being able to take that title on the independents and take on all comers internationally from all over the world, it's been fun for me because I'm granted that opportunity. And as cliche as it is, it's the man that makes the title doesn't make the man at
Oh
the
yeah,
end of the day.
yeah,
So
agree
I
on.
always fully believe in that, and how wrestlers are seen by a fan base is how they're going to be seen. If they're good, they're good. If they're not, they're going to cling on to whatever gimmick they are.
To that end, what do you think Mike Santana brings to that title? I'm a big fan. I'm hoping to talk to him for something we're doing for the magazine. And you know, the one word that I always say when it comes to Mike Santana is authentic. You know, I grew up in the Bronx, surrounded by guys like that, and he is the genuine article.
He is who he is, and he walks around with it. And I'm proud of what he's done and the accomplishments he made. I was his first opponent at Rebellion 2 years ago, when he did make his comeback at the Palms in Vegas. I don't forget about that either. And I also don't forget the fact that he didn't pick me for Team and TNA at NXT on the Invasion. But for him, it's just, I'm glad to see where he's come from me being a tag team for so long and knowing that same side of things where you see so much more in yourself. You've gotten everything out of you wanted out of this tag team. Now it's time to go out and do your own thing. I became a world champion, and here he is as the TNA world champion.
Yeah. Brian, anything?
Well, I mean, I would weigh in and say that I think that the relationship has been great for TNA. I mean, obviously, we see we were just talking about what a success these recent shows have been, and you know, I think obviously that relationship can only help. Of course, the other thing is, and obviously, you know, Steve, I know you're not on the decision-making level of the TNA organization, but is there any rumbling of people going like, oh, it's only a matter of time before they buy us or something like that? I mean, is there any fear of that or concern or anything like that?
Anybody in the world can just come in and buy it if the amount of money right there is gonna, like, somebody in Saudi Arabia or in Japan, or I don't, anybody can come in with $2 billion. I'm buying your company. It's easy as that. With WWE, I don't know. That's out of my control, like you said, and I only worry about what I can, and that's me as a talent going out there and going and putting on the best professional wrestling show that I can on my end.
Right.
And coming back at the end of the day and the boss give me a handshake saying thank you for your job. Like,
There's a thought and that some of the reason that WWE has become so supportive of TNA is to help kind of prop them up into that number 2 spot and steal it away from AEW. So making AEW.
Are you trying to make trouble here, Al? What are you trying to do?
So
Well,
the way
that,
I look at it,
that is
like,
the question. I mean, does that make it awkward for the two of you in as much as the two?
No.
I think that, again, like, what is so great about our relationship, and not even just us as a married couple, but the community of our friends and family around us, is that we only want to see each other succeed. And if that is, you know, Steve getting opportunities back at NXT or WWE, or you know, me getting to be on Dynamite and Collision, like, we are so supportive of each other, being like, what is going to be best for you? Because I love you and I just want to see you succeed. Obviously, if we didn't feel that way about each other, we wouldn't be married, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like, hopefully, but we feel that way about our friends too, right? You're looking at what Chelsea Green is getting to do right now on SmackDown, and it's incredible. And there's no one in this world, if I couldn't be successful as myself as a women's wrestler, I'd want to be as successful more than Chelsea Green. So to see that is amazing. To see some of the fun stuff Wendy Chu's getting to do on Evolve right now, and how her character is changing and evolving from this like creepy non-speaking doll, and now she's in therapy, and now she's getting opportunities. I couldn't be more proud. And so I think that the wrestling business always wants to position, you know, AEW versus WWE versus TNA, and what those connections are and the companies they work with. But us as wrestlers, we just want to see our friends do the best work they can do, make as much money as they can make, and be as successful as possible. So it doesn't matter what those relationships look like to us, because we love each other and we want each other to do the best work possible.
And that's the best part, though, too, is there are people that want to put these 1, 2, and 3 slots up there of the best wrestling companies, and that just makes it better for talent when it comes to the contract
Yes.
negotiations.
Mm.
And for talent to just work elsewhere on opportunities. It's just the business right now in the world of pro wrestling is the best that it's ever been, especially on television, for what you're able to see day in and day out, Monday through Friday. Like, I can't imagine being a fan, and I say this to fans all the time. Like, I don't know how you guys watch wrestling. I couldn't watch wrestling right now. It's the same, it's like watching football every week. Like, you have to go to
Yeah.
so many different streaming apps or find a
Yeah,
different channel to
that's true.
watch. And there's a game on every different night. Like, all right, what do I got? Like, it's insane.
Right.
But like now it's like for me as a talent who's worked in WWE and I grew up loving WWE and now being with TNA and seeing my wife go to AEW and you see all these different walks of life from everybody all over the world into these different companies and given these opportunities because not everybody fits into every company. Like
Yeah.
it's not going to happen that way. That's why it's a television show. WWE is its own show. TNA is its own show and AEW is its own show.
What another thing I wanted to ask you about that has been kind of a trend as of late is seeing wrestling couples packaged together as an act. I mean, you see now Zelina Vega with Aleister Black after being apart for a long time. We saw Becky and Seth team up. We've seen AJ and Punk. Any thoughts on that? Is that is it perilous? Do you think that's healthy? Does it sort of depend on what the booking is?
Yeah, I think it depends. I think when we were both in TNA, it was I was so established there, right? And you know, I had also been so established in prior to coming to TNA and the independent work I'd done around the world. And so fans wanted to see me get that opportunity. And I think for Steve, it was a different story. When he was coming into TNA, it was like, we have to establish this guy because he was in NXT for so long and respectfully didn't get a lot of opportunities and doesn't have a lot of fanfare around him. So they wanted to purposely keep us apart in terms of how it was put creatively to us verbatim was Steve risks becoming Mr. Purrazzo as
Mm.
opposed to being Steve Maclin. So we don't want that to affect how he's looked at, you know, beyond the immediate creative. And so I think now, if there was ever the opportunity, whether it was Steve coming to AEW or me, you know, one day going back to TNA, I think that is definitely something we would like to explore because I think people now on social media see our real relationship and see us beyond, you know, this like tough military guy who you know is front towards enemy all the time. They see his softer side and they see his silly side, and likewise for so long I was just like the serious wrestler and I had a vision and a goal to become a world champion and that's what I did. But there's a lot more to Deonna Purrazzo than just the virtuosa, and I think we could really play with that on screen. I think it would be really fun to bring out in each other. But yeah, it was just a matter of we have a different character to establish at the time, so we didn't get to do it.
Yeah. Is there when you talk about sort of relationship goals, is there a wrestling couple that you guys have always looked up to, or you just think they kind of getting it right?
I don't think look up to. I thought you were going to ask us who we wanted to challenge.
No, I don't think so. I think that we've been able to create such a path for ourselves in our relationship, and I think that night Rebellion 2023 was like it solidified that we're our own power couple, and maybe there's people who are looking up to us, right? Steve got to win the world championship and I got to win the Knockouts world championship.
That's
in the
right.
same
I
night.
remember writing about that. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and it's something that is so special to us for our careers and in our relationship that we got to do that at the same night. And even I think more so for me because I had already been 2-time Knockouts world champion, and although that didn't take away from how special it was, I was seeing Steve become the TNA world champion for the first time. And I know what that feels like to get that seal of approval and how emotional that is. And so I think it was even more special for me to get to see him do that for the first time the same night. But no, I think that we're creating our own path. And whether that's becoming world champions together, whether that's working at 2 different companies and still keeping a healthy relationship, or becoming podcasters and putting our podcaster boots on and trying to advocate for the military community as much as we've been this year. We just want to do good for ourselves, and we're not comparing ourselves to anyone or trying to emulate anyone else. We're just trying to do good in our own boots.
Is there a couple you want to take on, Steve? Maybe Chelsea and Matt?
Chelsea and Matt's the number one there, I think. I just think if that was a storyline creatively, that would be a very entertaining story. That just would be very entertaining because they're all cuffs would be off on that one, just going at each other.
Yeah, you know what would be fun? We are very, very close with Josh Alexander and Jade Chung, and they're our best friends. And I think if we could get Jade to wrestle maybe one more time, that would be really fun. But ultimately, I think as I'm thinking about it right now, I think, you know, to wrestle AJ Lee, Jersey girl, grew up idolizing her. AJ and Punk would be so fun. If like in a weird crazy wrestling world, if that could happen.
If you want some behind the scenes dirt that nobody knows about, CM Punk, before he almost possibly signed with TNA, was coming in and I was going to be his first challenger, which I found out right as Scott D'Amore was was let go. We were having dinner one night and he let me know, yeah, Punk was going to almost sign there, and then you were going to be his first challenger. I was like, shit.
Really?
Wow. That would have
Wow.
been cool, man. Like, cause it just, you see his time from coming back into wrestling, what happened at AEW and to even WWE. It just shows the star that he is now, and that he's always kind of been that way, and that that culture. He's literally a cult of personality. If you want to play the cliche to the song, but like he just shows the magnitude that he's like one of the last alive superstars.
Well, there was that period where things were getting really rough for him in AEW. It might have even been when he had left, where he was just randomly popping up at other companies' shows. And, you know, he went to WWE Raw until they asked him to leave, and he showed up at TNA, right? So, I mean,
there were a few times he was at behind the scenes in Chicago. It was cool to just see him, and it was just like, it was fun. I'm like, oh, CM Punk, what's up, man? He's like, oh, what's up, Mr. Maclin? I was like, cool, good to see you. Because he was really good to me when I was an extra in WWE, and it was, you always hear the horror stories an extra when you say hello to people, like people shun you and stuff, but like he was very respectful, and I never forgot that. And that's always something in wrestling that I never forget, is the people that were nice to me on the way up.
Yeah, yeah. Do you feel that role now kind of a veteran in your own right, and a former world champion, and I imagine somebody with kind of a leadership position in the TNA locker room? Are you mindful of that with the younger, newer talent coming in?
Always, even when TNA, we run the tryout matches sometimes on the second day of tapings, and I try to make sure to go out and watch. And if I'm never someone that's going to always tell you right to your face right after the match their critique, but later on, if I have something that stuck out to me, I'll tell you. But I also just try to see who's like out there working their ass off. I love to see the talent that's on in independence just working their butt off day in and day out and grinding and trying to get out there and make a name for themselves to get into better positions. Because a lot of them, when they do come to advice for me, or come to me for advice, it's like, oh, how do I get to TNA? How do I get to WWE? I'm like, I don't know an answer anymore. Like, if you want to go to WWE, go to college and become an athlete. If you want to come to TNA, like at the same time, like you have to get in front of the right people on an independent show, or just send in your tape to Dreamer. And then even with AEW, it's like, go out there and get over as possible on the indies and be undeniable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's great that there are this many channels now for wrestlers to ply their trade, and that a lot of these walls have come down. I mean, I thought about that. You know, you guys talking about being able to work these independent dates, that would have been unheard of just a few years ago, right? When both of you contracted to different companies, that was, there's talk of Nakamura being Tanahashi's final opponent, which is crazy. That even on that level, so much of that forbidden door has kind of been lifted. But I imagine you're all thankful for that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that as wrestling in general schedule winds down, right, and we're just focused on TV production, I think that it hinders our abilities and the amount of time we get in the ring and how we can practice and how our cardio is, because you can run on the treadmill all day long, but the minute you get in a wrestling ring, it's a completely different game. And so when you're not doing that consistently and you're not bumping consistently, it can be really rough to get back in the ring on national television, and you haven't been for 3 months. And so I think that being able to pick up independent dates, to be able to be able to go, AEW works with CMLL, to go down there, you works with Stardom, to be able to get opportunities there. I think that makes it a lot more like the mental game is easier for us, because it's like, oh, I haven't not been in the ring for 6 months.
Yeah.
To get a call that says like, you're gonna be on Dynamite and you haven't wrestled in 4 months, it's like, oh my gosh, like I can't really prepare myself. But if we're able to go out and work independent dates and work in these other high level companies, then we're getting the reps we need to be able to do a good job when the time calls.
And it's also helping the independent scene as well, where you have talent that's on television coming down and helping boost ratings for an independent show on their live stream, or or their ticket sales at a local VFW or some at any kind of like it's better for business across the board. And then it also allows me as an older talent now as a vet like to kind of see who's out there and what could possibly work, because wrestling's not always going to be from in ring, is going to end at some point. But for me behind the scenes, I love to be in that producer role. I love to be in that creative role where I can tell those stories, and I've always had better ideas for other people than I've had myself. And I think a lot of wrestlers can say that. It's just funny how that works out. And you just, because you're less critical for somebody else. I think this could work with you, or you see it in somebody else than you do yourself. But just to see some of the young talent and what's available out there of like, it just, the athleticism is just getting off. It's crazy. Like, I love just a nice drop down leapfrog, like high spot. Now you're having all these sequences and you're just like, oh, cool. Sweet. There you go. I'm just going to kick and punch now.
And
yeah,
well, we've talked about how obviously the upside of this reduced schedule is that you guys could have more normal lives now and not miss everybody's weddings and get to spend more time together. But obviously, Deonna, like you said, the downside is you can get a little rustier. You're not getting the reps in. That was a function that house shows served and things like that. And it does seem now, I guess, now that I think about it, that the indie scene now, with the freedom that you guys have, has almost taken the place of, let's say, house show tours, where you can get out there in between TV dates and still work. Because like you said, you could work as much as you want in a gym. You can even get in a ring, let's say at the performance center or whatever, but nothing takes the place of being in front of fans too, and working crowds and feeling the energy and giving back to it. And you guys need that.
No, and I made a point at the beginning of the year, like I talked about earlier, I had not such a great experience at CMLL at the end of, December 2024. And I was so upset about that and knew it was going to affect stuff at AEW. And I said to Steve, like, I hadn't wrestled more than a 3-minute match or a 6-minute match in 4 months. And so if I'm not going to be getting those opportunities at work, I need to make sure I'm getting those opportunities elsewhere, because clearly I'm rusty. And I don't like that feeling. I don't like how it made me feel. I didn't like how I know it made the office feel about me. So what can I change? And for me, it was, I'm going to take independent bookings in 2025. And I'm going to take as many as I can with my schedule with AEW. And I'm going to put in the work to get back to where I feel like I was my best. And I'm so grateful to all the independent companies out there that were interested in booking me. And gave me the opportunity to get in the ring with a lot of young talent and do some new stuff and just get my mind working again and get back in that groove of bumping at, once a weekend, twice a week. And, I think that it's really gotten me back to a point where I can be confident in my wrestling again and feel like when I do get called in for a Ring of Honor match, I'm not second guessing everything I'm doing. I'm not worried about what my in-ring shape is like. I feel like I'm back to where I want to be because of independent wrestling, and I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, and like you said, independent wrestling is kind of taking over that live event role. Like, even when I got to TNA, like, pandemic was still there and like indies were just starting to open up again. But here I am trying to introduce a new character on television, and when I'm at TV, I'm doing live TV or I'm doing tape TV.
Right.
I have to try to do something new that I don't know if it's going to work in front of this crowd or not.
But you don't want to try it out on television.
Yeah, so like that's the hard thing, is like now a lot of the times like you're seeing talent do things on television for the first time ever.
Right.
And because they're not getting that opportunity on live events or on independent shows. And it's like that's where you need to take advantage of those independent shows. Like, I'm going to be in a brewery in Toronto this weekend for Northern Crown, and I'm looking forward to that. After just wrestling in front of 8,000 people at Bound for Glory, now I'm more looking forward to a brewery that's more intimate setting. I can be one-on-one almost with fans ringside. I can just have fun with it and see what works.
Yeah. We talked about even in how it relates to John Cena, one of the biggest names of the in the business, a different wrestler the second half of the year than the first half of the year because he got those reps, right? And you see that hit the first year of his farewell tour, a lot of sort of disappointing performances, and then the John Cena we've seen the last several months is like, yeah, this was the guy I remembered who was like the great match machine. And I imagine it is just getting those reps and getting that practice out there.
Yeah, I really think consistency breeds confidence, and unfortunately that's just not the business that is today. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So wrestlers really have to take those opportunities and put their nose to the grindstone and do the work. You know, if you don't feel like you're getting as many opportunities as you'd like to get those reps in, it's up to us, you know, to use our resources. And the independent scene is,
Yeah.
you know, thriving right now. So why wouldn't you?
Yeah. Guys, this has been a lot of fun. We started talking about your podcast. Before we get out of here, tell people a little bit more about what Boots to Boots is, where they can find it.
Yeah, everyone can find Boots to Boots on YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, at Boots to Boots. But we're talking about big life transitions. And that doesn't just mean we're talking about veteran transitions in Steve's case or pro wrestling transitions. For me, we're talking about everyday real stories, real resilience, and real success in real people. And we hope that everyone finds a space where they can identify with what we're talking about and maybe learn a thing or two, and find themselves being able to get through that transition and those struggles a little bit easier because Boots to Boots exists.
Yeah, I've checked it out. Some you've got folks from the wrestling world, music, entertainment that you come on, and a lot of fun conversations. Thank you so much. Glad we were finally able to do this. Brian, real quick before we split, tell people how to get the book. Anything else you want to promote?
All right. Well, I'll make it real quick. I know I don't want to take up too much of these guys' time, but my new book, Irresistible Force, The Life and Times of Gorilla Monsoon. You can get it wherever books are sold, in print or digital. And the audiobook version with my own voice reading the book comes out December 2nd. And so I encourage people to look for it. I'm also, one last thing, I'm also selling my own autographed copies of the book. So people that are interested in buying one can reach out to me directly at brianrsolomon@yahoo.com. There you go.
Excellent. And again, pick up the latest issue of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. This probably isn't it by the time you're listening, over at pwa-online.com. Steve, Deonna, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you
Guys so much.